And I think what happens a lot of times is we make it about ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, my calling is important. You're here, Tommy. Everybody's here. We said this before, right? To help me fulfill my calling.
Yeah.
And what happens is that dismisses everybody else's calling, right? Or everybody else's purpose or everybody else's gifts, because you're like, no, it's not about them. It's about me.
What's up, family, and welcome to another episode of the Futures Here podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Nix. I'm here with Robert Boyes, and this is where we discuss leadership principles you need to lead the next generation. Today, we're going to be talking about what is your leadership lens, and you're going to want to hear this episode because it's all about
Scalability.
Absolutely. So if you're a leader and you're like, how do I grow my organization, my ministry, the thing that I'm leading, but you actually want to grow it in a healthy way. Because we'll talk about that too, about you can actually grow things and be unhealthy, but if you want to grow it well, lead people well, and have scalability, there's going to be 3 different ways that we're going to be talking about this. And so when we talk about our leadership lens, there's a couple different ways we're looking at it. 1, 3 types of leaders, right? There's the then and now. There's the now and next, and then there's the near and new, right? So, and you can have, we were talking about this, you can have healthy and unhealthy versions of each of those, right?
Sure.
So we're not, a lot of times we feel like, oh, we're just here bagging on leaders, and it's not so much about that, but we want healthy leaders so that we reach this next generation with the gospel and for Christ. But you can have healthy and unhealthy versions of all these. So if we're talking and you find yourself in one of those, that's okay. If you find yourself and that's your lane, hey, do it well, do it healthy. That's what we're saying, right?
Yep.
And so the very first one, right, is the.
But before you get into that, let me just say something, because I want to just say I have learned just as much from bad leaders as I've learned from good leaders.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when you have somebody that is, let's just say, not healthy, right? It makes you feel a certain way, right? You kind of react in certain ways, and you see the way they do things, and you see like, something just doesn't feel right about the way they're leading. And so for my whole career, at least, and maybe yours as well, the people that I have been under, or the people that I've seen that have been in proximity to, that have not led well, in my opinion, I've actually learned a lot from them.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
It helps me understand how not to lead.
Yeah, and I would say that, especially to younger leaders out there, I've done this a lot. I've done it with all my mentors. I watched and I learned from them and I listened to them. Well, I should say I listened to them and then I watched them.
Yeah.
So I would gain all the good stuff that they would share and the classes and the cohorts and all the things. And then in proximity to their life, I'd watch them, and I did learn a lot of stuff where I'm like, okay, I like this. This I'm not going to do, or I can. So it's okay, friends, to not live in a kind of like a black and white space, but really a space of both and, where I can go, they make a bad decision, or their leadership in this area is not good.
Right.
It's okay. It doesn't make them an overall bad leader. But also, if they have some good areas here, it doesn't make them an overall good leader. And our point is continue to grow in your leadership. Yeah. Become the person God created you to be. And that's really the trajectory. Yeah. And that's what we want leaders to know. So the first one, right, in this, what's your leadership lens, especially if you want to scale? First one you had down is the then and now leader.
Yeah, the then and now leader. So the then and now leader, the best way I could describe them is their vision is hindsight. Oh, so what they do is they look back a lot to see, like, what did it look like before when it was successful? Yeah. And they keep trying to recreate that. These organizations that have leaders that are then and now are more kind of leader-centric orgs, right? Okay. So they typically are built around the leader. They tend to be smaller organizations because a lot of times what's most important in that organization is the leader's calling. And so again, that could be good or bad.
Whether that's stated or not.
Whether that's stated or not, that leader is leading from the lens of, man, I built something and I'm trying to always maintain that, right? I'm trying to not necessarily grow it, although they might think they're trying to grow it. But in reality, their behaviors, their values, all of those things really lead it to be more of an organization that is in maintenance mode, trying to recreate something that was then and recreate it now. So it's the idea of, hey, what got me here can keep me here. And
Okay,
so
yeah.
there's very little innovation that happens in these organizations. There's very little adaptation. And it's really just kind of recycling a lot of the same things over and over. Right. And so most of the time, there's also not a lot of strategic planning that happens in these organizations because these leaders
There's a
are
lot of what? Activity. Yeah.
but not a lot of strategy.
Yeah.
And in fact, what happens is that they base their whole year off a calendar.
Mhm.
So they set up a calendar. It's a calendar that's worked before. It's a calendar that has things that they are very comfortable with, things that people know and understand. And so you're just kind of moving along, doing the same thing year after year. You might change it a little bit, right? Give it a little extra flair or whatever. But the reality is that you're really just doing the same things over and over because you kind of like where you're at. You like where the organization's at and you like what you do.
Yeah, two things, man. One, I've seen organizations. There's one we've worked with before where their tagline is "the need is the mission."
Yeah,
and it's just whatever the need is, we're just going to meet that need, and that's kind of the thing that keeps them going. Another thing that kind of a nuance in this is I've also seen leaders exactly how you're describing, but maybe they don't have the like they didn't build the thing, but they're always looking for whatever works. So they're just like, oh, I heard these guys over in Fresno did this, like, well, and they just adopt it and they just do it because there's no like stopping, thinking through strategy. It's just like, hey, does that work? And the reason I think that's why that happens is because we're so busy with the activity, we just got to keep on going. I don't have time to stop and think about how this is going to affect everybody. Think about was this actually going to affect my vision and mission? I just need something that works, and I need it now.
Yeah.
And I've seen that. And then I actually had from this one organization I'm thinking about, I had one of their other leaders who used to be there come to me and say how damaging that actually was, how they were dismissed, how they weren't cared for, because you're kind of a barrier to all the stuff we're doing.
Sure.
And so it's kind of like, yeah, we just need to maintain kind of like this past deal. And hey, it worked then, should work now. But the problem is when you go through something like a pandemic, and everything changes.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
And we've seen those organizations now, post-pandemic, are trying really hard to go back to what was.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's what they know. Now, the other thing about this is the people in these organizations, let's not just put it all on the leader, right? Because the people in these organizations get very comfortable with this, right? They actually, a lot of times will describe it as, we love our org, or we love our church, or, we love our leader, right? Because they're all very comfortable. And again, comfortable because it tends to be small enough, these organizations, because it's not really scalable. It tends to be small enough that you still feel kind of seen and heard and, all of that, right? So comfort is a big part of these organizations, and which is why they don't change. In fact, change a lot of times is seen as the enemy.
Right.
And as you were describing, if somebody suggests change, then since change is the enemy, and if you're suggesting change, then guess what?
Yeah, who becomes
You're the enemy.
Yeah, that's right. And then, I mean, there's that sense of that too, where it is kind of based on that leader. It's based on what always has been, and it's based on that past. Like I so many churches I've talked to. Hey, we used to be the biggest church in the city. We were the first church in the city. We were the first televised church in the whatever it is, and they always want to go back to that. And I think the mistake there as a leader is we should celebrate that. Like, look what God did, and God's up to something now. Where is he taking it? Is he's doing a new thing? Like, what is it? There is a danger too on the other side of that for younger leaders, especially when they experience the then and now leader, to go, we got to burn everything from the past. When I was a younger leader, that was me. Like, I was just like, it didn't work. So instead of going, the wisdom would be, oh, there's good stuff there. What things do we need to resurrect? What things do we need to learn from? What things, right? There's a wisdom and understanding how we got there, the history of things to help root us here so that we can move forward in the future. Right. Yeah. And that really though can even take us to that next one, right? Which is the now and next leader.
Yeah. One more thing about this though, I will say your calling is important. We want to be clear about that. If you feel called to lead something, to start something, to grow whatever it is, we're not trying to minimize your calling. Your calling is important. What we're saying is it may not be the most important thing in terms of what is God calling you to create, right?
Yeah.
Or to build. And I think what happens a lot of times is we make it about ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, my calling is important. You're here, Tommy. Everybody's here. We've said this before, right? To help me fulfill my calling.
Yeah.
And what happens is that dismisses everybody else's calling, right? Or everybody else's purpose or everybody else's gifts, because you're like, no, it's not about them. It's about me. Yeah. And so if you're a leader who is feeling a strong sense of calling, the goal, I think, in that particular sense, in that organization, as you lead people, is to figure out how can you lead people through that calling to help them grow and become who they were created to be.
Yeah, and that's our core, right? That's our core messaging of this type of leadership. It's so important for that. And so absolutely, like, your calling is good, but it's how the intentionality and how you purpose that calling, how you play that out is what we're trying to change. Because we've seen so much damage come from this. Like, the dark side of this kind of leader here is that.
Yeah.
And it does move on into the next one as well.
Yeah.
Because now you have the now and next leader. So that's that leader that it's super involved right now. A lot of program, a lot of activity, right? And then what's next? And so, but not too far in the future.
No,
it's
not
just
too far.
what's
Just next.
What's next? Like, what's the next thing? So, and a lot of you guys, I think you feel this. You ever do like maybe you did a big conference, or you the big event for the year, or the big outreach, or whatever it is. And it's like, oh yeah. And what's the very next day, you're like, okay, we gotta think about what's next.
What's coming?
Oh, what about next year? How are we going to do it bigger? It's just that it's incremental. It's that next kind of thing. And so a lot of these leaders bring a lot of energy to what they're doing. And that's exciting for everybody else. That energy feeds a lot of other people. And you can scale this.
Yeah, it is. It can be scalable, for sure.
But to a certain degree. So, and this is where the vision for me gets tough in these areas for the now and next leader, is because it's like, after doing that for 5-10 years, I'm going, why are we doing this? Well, for me, I'm doing it right then. I'm always asking, like, why are we doing this? And if the answer is just like, well, dude, we did 200 people this year, we could do 400 people next year. And I'm going back and going, okay, for what reason? Yeah. Is it just that we can gather 400 people now?
Just to grow for the sake of growth?
Just to grow for growth's sake, right? Now, hear me when I say I love growth.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
there's no life if there's no growth.
Yeah, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? There's that saying. But there's also parts of, like, if you're not growing, I hope you're learning. And from the learning that you can grow again. Like, that's how I really look at it. And a lot of times, right, we talk about this is the now and next leader, a lot of times event centered, right? Where can we do better? How do we, it's these kind of small tweaks just for that kind of incremental growth.
Yeah, where with the first leader, there was actually very little adaptation or innovation. Yeah. With this leader, there tends to be a lot of adaptation. There might be some innovation, but typically not. Typically, there's a lot of adaptation to what you're doing. Like you said, you do one event and it's successful, and the next event, you want it to be more successful. So you kind of change, what it is. These leaders are also what I would call, and I hope nobody gets offended by this, but is what I call conference learners.
Yeah.
So they love going to conferences because that's where they see, well, what's the next, cool process or program or system or technology that we could use, so that our organization or our church can be just like that other one. So there's a danger in that. We used to, back when I was in the technology world, right? We used to call it back. Now I'm really dating myself. Is airline magazine syndrome.
Yeah.
Before social media. There were these things called magazines.
Okay.
Magazines were these books usually that were very colorful. They had beautiful, glossy. And they had these things called articles in them. But what would happen is we would always be really worried when our senior leader would take a trip somewhere. And what happens is that these airline magazines would always feature key business leaders and the things that they were doing. And inevitably, when that leader came back, they would always show us the magazine, go, We need to be doing this. How come we're not doing this, right? How come we don't have the latest and greatest of this? So we used to call that airline magazine syndrome.
Yeah.
But that's conference syndrome for me, right? Is a lot of times and I'm not saying there aren't good things happening, but the innovators are going to the conference to teach the adapters how to do their thing, right? And so what happens is if you get used to that, if you get used to just being an adapter, then you never get to the point where you're actually innovating. And again, doesn't mean that you can't grow, but your strategy is typically, you ask yourself the question, well, where can we be better, right? There's a process improvement, which is healthy and good, and we want organizations to go through that. Or you might say, well, I want to do more of this and less of that, right? Or you might even remove certain programs and add certain programs. But again, that's all just adapting. And you can grow. Like we said, this is a scalable organization. It can be but here's the thing about scalability with an organization that is what I'll call very mission-centered and not very vision-centered, right? Is that it's costly. You have to add more people, you have to add more systems. It's costly to actually adapt and to grow. Because of the fact that you have to add something new every single time. You're basically bolting on new products.
And so for those of you guys who are nonprofit leaders, the now and next one is actually, this type of leadership is actually encouraged because of funding.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you have all these funders out there and they're like, so they literally ask questions that go, I got to be a now and next leader.
Right.
Because they're going, well, what's next? I gave you, $100,000 last year. And so, what did you learn? How did you grow? Like, what's next? Oh, well, next year. And so we get into the cycle where we have to come up with sexy things every year. Right. And it's like, oh, this is the new, right.
Yeah.
It's exhausting and it costs a lot of money. And then a lot of times it's all over the place. Right. Now we're like just chasing money, and it's like we're allowing foundations and funders to shape the direction that God's trying to take us, instead of us going, this is who I was created to be. This is what God's asked us to do. And we're going to go do that in faith, and that part's really difficult. The other big thing about this kind of leadership is, which is more, it's not a big deal, but I think it's something that you and I are always kind of like, is sometimes these leaders get labeled as visionary.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, it's
because it can grow something to pretty large, actually, this kind of leader.
But so talk to me about that. Like, what about that? Are we always kind of like, we're not trying to be salty, but it's kind of like, well, it's not, you're not visionary.
Right. Well, again, we're more...
You're a missionary.
Yes, exactly. I think we think of visionary more in the purest sense of the form, right? That you're envisioning something new, that you're innovating, that there's a new reality that you're trying to create, not just a bigger current reality.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like, that's the difference. But a lot of times these quote unquote visionary leaders, they have a vision statement for their organization, but it typically tends to be a numerical. Right. Yeah. We want, because we do this and we do this really well, then our vision is to do it 10 times as much or to have 100 times as many of these things. Right. So that's what happens. But for us, that's goal oriented, not vision oriented. Right. And so there is a distinction. It's not to say that you can't have numerical goals that go with your vision, but really when we're talking about visionary leaders, we're talking about people who tread new paths. Yeah. We're talking about people that say, hey, I can go, I can go over those mountains, right? I can go through those mountains. Like they envision what's on the other side of the mountain instead of saying, I can make a great camp here at the base of this mountain, right? They're the ones looking beyond that and not just trying to grow something that already exists.
No, that's good, man. Yeah, and so looking at that, then we get to the next one, right? Which is near and new. So far we've done then and now, then we're now and next, and now it's the near and new, Lance, right? And so this is actually where we consider the visionary leader is kind of camps out in. Right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, and even within this type of leadership, I think there's two types of visionary leaders that we usually think of, right? There's what we call the push visionary leader, and then there's the pull visionary leader. Now, the push visionary leader is the one who looks at the current reality, right? The current state, And they're always trying to push people toward a better future state. And that's great. That's awesome, right? They have this idea of what they want to see in the future, what changes they want to see in their environment and their community. And so they tend to stand here in the present and go, come on, guys, let's go. Let's move forward. Let's move forward. Then you have the pull leader, which is more unique, actually. But the pull leader is what I would consider the true visionary. It's the leader that's standing in the future and has a very clear idea of what that future looks like and is pulling people toward it. Yeah. Now, the problem with that person is not a lot of people can see it. It's really hard to vision cast.
Right here,
yeah. It's really hard to vision cast when you're a pull leader.
Everybody's like, what are you talking about, dude? I'm like, trust me.
Yeah. No, there is a lot of that, right?
No,
you have you have this idea in your head of like, trust me, I know how good this can be. I know how different it can be. I think we can solve this, or I think we can make, huge impact here. And everybody else is just sitting around going like, I don't see it. I don't get it. Yeah. And so it's a lot harder to lead as a pull leader. And a lot of times you just have to keep that momentum going. You just have to keep pulling people until you finally get over the hump of where they can begin to see that, right?
Yeah, and I think this kind of leadership, the near and new, I think what we've experienced too is you're inviting people into problem solve, and that's why it's a big part for us where we're going, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And I know I get a lot of energy. I know you get a lot of energy out of like getting a group of people together going, what? Like, here's the problem. And then believing that this group of people, the brain trust, the whoever, like we can come up with this, like we could figure this out. And so that's why for these type of leaders too, it's less about the threat to the person. It's about, how are you bringing a solution to the problem? Yeah. And so, but that can get difficult as well when it's like, when you're asking people to do something that's not the type of leader they are. Yeah. You know what I mean? So if they're a then and now leader and I'm going, dude, okay, here's the problem. How are we going to do it? And we're talking about creating something that's never even existed, or they're just going to be like, so then in those conversations, they're going to be, oh, do you know what we used to do? Yeah. Right. And then that type of leader, especially a pull kind of leader, it's just going to be like, yeah, that didn't work, and so there's that tension that comes up in that.
Sure.
And that can be really difficult. And along with, I think, for these type of leaders too, a downside is that like the frustration of being like you don't see it, and then you can get really kind of like, you can become a tyrant because no one's getting it and it's their fault, not my fault. Right.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah. I told you what it is. Like, how come you can't see it? It's because people are made differently. Like, sure. This is the beautiful kind of tension and back and forth that helps us all grow.
But I think in an organization led by a near and new leader, it is very valuable to have now and next leaders. And I'll tell you why.
Absolutely.
Because they're the ones who, again, when we go back to talk about what we were talking about, those leaders, they're the ones who keep pushing things forward. Yeah. And you need those kinds of leaders. You need leaders who are so focused on the next thing that they know how to create momentum. They know how to move things forward. The challenge for a near and new leader is to bring the vision closer. Right. Even though maybe you give the vision in bite-sized chunks, right? Maybe you bring the vision closer to the, maybe what are we going to look like at the end of this year? What are we going for this year? Now, you never give up that idea of what that long range future looks like, but you do have to bring it back a little so that the rest of the people that you're leading actually feel like, okay, well, at least I know where I'm going this year.
What am I doing today?
Yeah.
How am I going to, and affirming that. And so I think, so friends, when we talk about these three different lenses of leadership, and hopefully what this does is help you start to categorize people, categorize yourself, and start going, oh, that's where the tension's at with so-and-so, or why the org's like this, or whatever it is. But, when we talk about the good and bad of each one of these, our definition of leadership, that we're helping those around us, we're leading, become who they were created to be while in the vehicle of, towards our vision and mission that you're leading, that actually is the remedy to each one of these sections. because for instance, if you're a new leader, and like I'm more of like a pull visionary person. If I'm just frustrated and I'm gonna pull you into the future no matter what, like I'm not caring about how
More
you're
dragging
created to be.
people.
Right. I'm not, and then I'm dragging people, right, by their hair, and they're just like, this is painful. And then I'm actually not going, oh, you're a now a next leader? Okay, great. I need to affirm that gifting. I need to work on being better here. You need to be, great at where you're at, and we come together. And that's the team dynamic piece that you want.
Yeah.
I will ask, I think for each one of these, where you say there's good, and I think you have different types of these leaders within your organization that you're all working together. Help me understand though, Robert, the then and now leader.
Yeah.
How can they be a benefit to an overall organization if they're that type of leader?
Oh, how can they be a benefit within your organization?
Yeah. So if you were like a near and noon leader, how is it then and now leader? Like,
I think where they add a lot of value is they really can be, if you can help them really truly understand their purpose, not just their calling, but their purpose, right? Because I think let me talk about that a little bit, because a lot of times people see calling as just a specific assignment or a location or a thing. But for me, calling is more about purpose, really. It's like, well, what is God really asking? Who is God asking me to be in this process? So I think when you find leaders who are now and then, then and now leaders.
Then and now,
when you find then and now leaders, they actually make really great managers. They're really good in the present moment. They're really good at being present with people. Because they're not obstructed by having to see too far in the future or too worried about what's next.
They're right here. They're servants.
They're
right?
servants. They're right in the presence. Yeah. And so if you can live out your calling in that healthy way, then those are the people I want in charge of, those kinds of areas where they're very shepherding kind of people, very pastoral kind of people. And again, there are a lot of small churches, small organizations that are healthy, that have people who want to be servants, right? Who don't even care about growing. Honestly, they just feel like
present.
Yeah. I just want to be present. I'm just doing what God is calling me to do, and I'm happy doing that, and that's great. But again, we're just trying to help you understand that when you're talking about organizational leadership, that if that becomes unhealthy, then you can create a really toxic culture in that organization, and you may think that you're actually a different kind of leader, but you're not. And so you have to be really clear about the kind of leader that you are.
I think too, there's a place there too when we talk about organizational memory or institutional memory. But I think how you use that in a healthy way is that you're interpreting that history or where we're coming from in regards to, again, this is my leadership leaking out in regards to what the future holds, like where are we at now, like what can we learn from it, instead of always just wanting to go back to it.
Right.
And that's really good. But yeah, so I think whether, if you guys think, and what's easiest about this is to think about other leaders in these areas, like, oh, they're definitely a then and now leader, and this is why it's so terrible. But I think you can actually, if I would encourage you to have some self-introspection, right? And just go, look, where am I? As far as we're describing this, what kind of leader am I? That really helps you understand, okay, here's how I mitigate the dark side of that, and here's how I really push into the strengths of that.
And what kind of leader do I want to be, right? Because again, if you feel like, oh, I want to be this visionary leader, but really you're operating on a calling only, then there's some growth there that needs to happen. There's some introspection, there's some analysis, there's some assessments you have to take. Like you have to figure out, who am I really, and how do I get to that place?
So are these categories fatalistic, or can you actually grow?
Oh, I think you can grow into them.
Okay,
absolutely.
yeah.
I would say I have grown into them.
Yeah.
Because I think in my early leadership days, I was definitely a now and next type of leader. I was very, very much focused on what is happening right now. And then as soon as I was able to complete that, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the next task. I'm ready for the next problem. Like I would get excited, right? About, okay, what can I solve next and where can I add value next? But it was very short-sighted. Whereas now I think bigger picture, right? I'm thinking about like, well, how can I make monumental change? How can I add value in a way that helps people, create monumental change in their life, in their marriage, in their organizations? So I think I've become, in my, wiser age, a lot more strategic in my thinking and a lot more visionary in my thinking.
No, yeah, I would totally affirm that, man. It's interesting to hear your view of your journey in that. And I would say for those of you guys listening out there that, yeah, you can grow in all this. Yeah. I also think there's a season part to it. You get a little bit older and you start going, hey, I've been solving problems for 10, 20 years, but I want to solve the root problem.
Yeah.
Or I want to, like, you start thinking about legacy, or you start thinking about, okay, knowing who you are more, and like, what's the main thing that I can leave on this world, to make it better. And so I think that's really good. Well, friends, I hope that's been helpful for you as we talk about what's your leadership lens. And we gave you 3 different options there: the then and now leader, the now and next leader, and the near and new leader. We hope that helps you in your leadership, and to know the fact that when you start to understand that, you can grow in it and become the leader that God creates you to be. So we hope that's helpful for you today. Go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. We're so thankful for you guys, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.